go for launch.
5.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
4.
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
This whole thing is insane.
3.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
Where's the kaboom?
2.
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
1.
Reports, incredible as they seem, are not the results of mass hysteria. First eyewitness accounts of this grisly development came from people who were understandably frightened and almost incoherent. Officials and newsmen at first discounted those eyewitness descriptions as being beyond belief. However, the reports persisted. Medical examinations of some of the victims bore out the fact that they had been partially devoured. I think we have some late word of just arriving, and I'll interrupt to bring this to you. This is the latest disclosure in a report from National Civil Defense Headquarters in Washington. It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder. A widespread investigation of reports from funeral homes, morgues, and hospitals has concluded that the unburied dead are coming back to life and seeking human victims. It's hard for us here to believe what we're reporting to you, but it does seem to be a fact.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead. The dead who live on living flesh. The dead whose haunted souls hunt the living. The living whose bodies are the only food for these ungodly creatures. Night of the living dead. More shattering than your strangest nightmare.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Greetings, my fellow galactic travelers, and welcome back to Planet 8. This is your Mission Commander Larry speaking to you from our hidden base. Chief Engineer Bob is here by my side as always in the command center, and circling Planet 8 in our orbital spy satellite is Reconnaissance Officer Karen.
On this episode of Planet 8, we're going to be discussing the cinematic zombie classic, or is it ghoul classic, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And we have a very special guest. Somebody pinch me, I think I'm living dead. The one and only Judith O'Dea. Thank you so much for joining us here on Planet 8.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me kick it over to our Chief Engineer, Bob. He has a bit of history with you. Bob, why don't you go ahead and give us a little background, and then we'll get into it.
Well, yeah, I think it was actually 10 years ago, this week, actually.
Really?
We did a Night of the Living Dead. We did Creature Features Night at the Giants game. And San Francisco Giants, I can't even remember who they played. I think they won that night. And after the game, we had John Stanley from Creature Features host Night of the Living Dead with Judith as a guest and showed the movie on the big scoreboard screen. Everybody got to go down, sit in the outfield, and watch the movie.
So awesome.
It was a blast.
And nobody had to wear a mask.
The good old days.
Yes.
Days. So let's go ahead and start the interview, though. Judith, why don't you tell us a little bit about growing up and how you became interested in becoming an actress?
Oh, golly. I think that started right from the get-go when I was about that tall. I can remember when I was about 5 years old, or maybe even a little younger, sitting on the stoop of my great-grandmother's house. We lived right next door to them in Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio. I would sit there and rock back and forth and back and forth. I'd sing any song that I could make up. I always seemed to live in my head, even at that young age. So I think I knew way back then that being in front of a camera or on a stage in front of an audience was something that I really needed to do. So when I was still in my single digits, I remember auditioning for an equity company, a touring equity company for children's theater that came into town, and they were doing The Snow Queen, I believe. And I was so thrilled. My parents took me, I auditioned and got the part. I was able to say, "This is the Snow Queen's palace, cold, cold." And I won't bore you with it, but it was a phenomenal speech. But in any event, that started it all. Then I moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When I was 15, I auditioned for the Pittsburgh Playhouse, which at that time was just one of the best venues for live theater that we had, aside from any touring professional company that came in. They had 3 wonderful theaters, but I auditioned for a musical. They wanted choral members or chorus members. Fred Burley, James Lawler, Bill Glennon, Duncan Noble, these were all the wonderful people who were producing the show. I auditioned and got into the chorus. So right from the beginning, when I was in high school at 15 years old, I would go to school during the day. I would go to the theater at night and rehearse. We performed 6 days a week. It was a full, regular theater venue. And I was fortunate enough to continue on. I auditioned for other shows and was selected. And in Pittsburgh, then I continued not only on the stage, but in television, KDKA TV, if anybody is familiar. I did variety shows for them. I then broke into radio and I was Dawn O'Dea in the morning at about 5 o'clock on WJAS. I did the weather and the weather and the traffic. But then I started commercial work. That's where I met Carl Hardman. And by the way, we're recording this on the 22nd of September. Carl died on the 22nd of September, I believe it was 2005. So this is sort of sad, but a celebratory time. I met Carl. He had Hardman and Associates, where we recorded all kinds of commercials, radio, television commercials. I met Carl and Marilyn, lots of other people, Chuck Craig, if you're familiar with those names. Then I went on to Hollywood. I wanted to make it big in film. I got a call from Carl within a year saying, George Romero, Russ Reiner, Jack Russo, and I are going to make a film. Do you want to come back to Pittsburgh to audition? Well, I jumped right on a plane, went back to Pittsburgh, auditioned, and was very, very fortunate to get the role of Barbara. So that's how all of that came about.
That's great. So you thought you'd have to go all the way to Hollywood, and you could have stayed home.
I could have stayed home.
I love the different jobs that you had as you built your career and gained your experience, not only in the theater, but radio and television, it's a completely different world from what I read in breaking into the business, as it were. But I love that you went through the ranks,
Well, and, I auditioned also for Carnegie Tech. This was way back in the early 60s. And at that time, Carnegie Institute was Carnegie Tech instead of Carnegie Mellon. I was accepted into their drama department.
Oh, wow.
This is something that my parents were thrilled about. And yet, I had been making a living, not a living, I should say. I was making a salary every Friday night. I'd pick up my paycheck throughout high school. And here I was breaking into the other aspects of entertainment, TV and such. I decided not to go to Carnegie Tech. I broke my parents' heart, or at least my mother's heart. I said, I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop what I'm doing. I so loved the commercial work and the radio work, and of course the theater every night and the musical reviews. So I didn't stop. And there are parts of me that still have that little bit of regret that I didn't go to Carnegie Mellon, but Carnegie Tech.
So when you went back to Pittsburgh for the audition, did you have any idea what kind of movie you were auditioning for?
I knew it was going to be a horror film, Bob.
Oh, okay.
I had no idea what it was going to be about. In fact, I never really got to read a complete script. We sort of worked from scene to scene to scene. I know that they had a full script, but I think it went through, as we were filming, quite a few changes along the way.
This is probably not an easy question to answer, but some folks, they have children and you can never pick which one's going to be the astronaut or the politician. Was there any inkling when you were making this film that it would just become this iconic movie that you'd have fans generation after generation built into it?
Not at all. None of us involved ever even thought of that. Or I certainly didn't. I was a young girl we started filming when I was 22. The film was released when I was 23. I think we were all so thrilled to be making a feature film outside of Hollywood. We were one of the first to make a film that really clicked. And of course, we had no idea back then that it would click as it has over the years. But we were just thrilled to be making a film. Had no idea what would happen to it.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know if anyone was really into the horror genre. I think when they made the film, they just figured this might be the easiest genre to make a film, or at least have a successful film in.
Bob, you're absolutely right. In fact, I can remember George saying that they thought this would be a quick way to make a bit of money and then go on to make films that might have been more to their liking. It's funny how these things happen. George just lived and breathed zombies all his life.
That's true. I mean, we were even talking about the fact that this movie kind of started the whole genre, really, because before this movie, zombies were basically, brought to life to be workers or whatever, and it was all the voodoo Haitian. So Night of the Living Dead was the first one that actually brought the ghouls and the eating of the flesh, and you have to shoot them in the head, and that whole thing that continues today all the way through up with The Walking Dead and everything else that's going on.
We didn't realize back then, but we really broke boundaries when you stop to think of it. Some of the things that you just mentioned, people eating body parts of other people. Nobody did that back in the film days back then. The fact that a child actually murdered and ate parents. And that never, ever happened. It was, and I also think that we were one of the very first films that really, what do they call them when you want to, you help me here, you want to make the money to do the film, so you have not a fundraiser, but
like a Kickstarter?
Kickstarter, exactly right. Back then, we had Image 10, we had 10 people who put in money for that film to make it. Well, as we shot it, we didn't have enough money to finish it. But because Pittsburghers became aware of what we were doing, there was a tremendous interest on the part of so many different people in town that they began to contribute to the film as well. So finally, we were one of the first Kickstarters, and that was way back in 1967.
But you had to be a personal Kickstarter, actually going face to face with people and asking for money.
Oh, I think that's one of the hardest things in the world. I never did that. So, one thing I have to ask, I'll do this before I forget. Obviously we were rewatching the movie when we were going to talk about it in this episode. And I was sitting there with my girlfriend. I was telling her, that's Judith running for the farmhouse, running down the road. Did you really do all that running barefoot on the road and through the weeds and everything else? Yes, I did.
Oh.
I did. In fact, one of the very first scenes we shot was through the woods where there were all the trees and whatnot. I had shoes on then, but when I lost the shoe in the cemetery,
right.
And actually, that's quite a story. The first time I lost a shoe was at the house when I ran around to the porch. When I fell, I was going hell-bent for election, running around. Fell down and lost the shoe. George then did a pickup shot about a month or two later with my losing the other shoe back in the cemetery. So there were scenes where I did run barefoot and the others when I did have my shoes on.
That's great. So you actually did, there weren't a lot of stunts in the movies, but all the falls and runs and everything, that was you. No stunt people.
Oh, no, absolutely. In fact, everybody did his or her own stunts. If you were to get shot, boy, they tape you up with the explosives and just pray to God that you didn't burn up. Yeah. It was amazing to watch. We did have some episodes where I think some of the folks got a little burned, but overall we were very, very fortunate.
That's good. So no real injuries during the movie then?
No, not that I can recall. I do think that there was one, and I'm trying to remember who it was with, but the fire that was set at night with the chair, etc., and when they were throwing the Molotov cocktails later on, I believe that one of the zombies one of the ghouls back then was caught on fire, and they just doused him with a towel or whatever, and we just went on filming. You never thought of stopping back then. You just did it.
I was wondering, in filming the movie, was it filmed scene to scene, or was it out of order? Some films they'll film like the middle before the ending, and it's kind of out of sorts.
It was filmed out of order.
Yeah, it was filmed out of order. Okay.
Yeah, but when I say that, I should backstep a little bit. We started in the cemetery, then we moved to the house. And so maybe I should take that back. I think that we did follow basically the script. But what happened was when we ran out of money, we took an hiatus of about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, in order to build up a little more finance. And we came back and were able to do pickup shots that George discovered we needed to do in order to make the consistency throughout the film. But I think, Larry, you're right. We did follow the script fairly accurately.
Well, was there a lot of ad-libbing, or were you able to say, well, how about this? Or was it pretty straightforward, let's go with the script?
I know on my part, there was ad-libbing. In fact, one of my favorite parts in the film was when I was telling Ben in the house what happened to Johnny and me. That was all ad-lib. George said to me, here are the main things that I want you to put in. I want you to mention the candy. And there were things that I had to put in, but he just said, do it the way you'd feel it or you'd want to do. I remember doing that and getting so wrapped up and emotional about it. The snot was coming out of my nose. And we finished that scene. The audio, Gary Striner, who was running audio then, said, oh God, I don't know if I got it. I think we're going to have to run it again. So we did the whole thing again. And of course it was ad-lib, but it's never going to be the same. What you see in the film was actually the original, the very first.
Wonderful.
He was able to get all the sound, and we were able to do that. But that was ad-lib. I'm not sure how much anyone else did, but often George would give us the idea of what we wanted, and then we would take it from there.
Well, and I will say, we all watched the film getting ready for the podcast, and my wife had never seen the film. And she, enjoyed it. It did my heart good that there's someone who never saw the film and can appreciate all of the acting, all of the action, the story and everything brand new. It was a wonderful thing to be there with her experiencing that.
Well, please tell her thank you, because I think that's one of the biggest concerns I have. Does the film hold up? Can somebody who's never seen it before watch it now and remain interested in it?
Well, I will say, at least for my wife, yes.
Bless your wife.
Thank you.
Judith, I was wondering, for a good portion of the film, Barbara is in almost a catatonic state. She's so shocked.
Right.
What sort of preparation did you do, or what did you draw on to play that out?
Wow. I think I cannot honestly tell you I focused on one thing, but I do know that because what was happening was so new and unusual, no one had ever seen this kind of thing happen before, that I focused on the fact that how do you explain it? I just saw my brother killed, and I saw him killed by somebody who looked dead. I think I just felt it was right to go in and think about this, because I didn't know how to act in the real world. How do you just carry on when you see something like that happen that's never happened before? I wish I could tell you, Karen, that I had a special focus. one thing I can tell you is that the fear, the terror that sometimes, hopefully, you saw me present on the screen did come from when I was a very little girl. I must have been, 7, 8 years old. My parents took me to see The House of Wax in 3D with Vincent Price in the theater. They had no idea what it was about, but they thought 3D, let's all go see. I was so terrified that it affected me, and still does. It has affected me my entire life to see that burned face and remember when the woman pounded on his face and it cracked and I literally dragged them out of the film. I was so frightened.
Oh, wow.
That was something I did go back to use.
Well, your performance is very convincing in the movie. Yeah.
And Judith, I can't help but think that there are actors and actresses now that are going to be in a genre film, and they'll refer back to Judith O'Dea in the original Night of the Living Dead. I want something like that. In all things in life, there is a first, and your performance was the first in that genre, and it was brilliant. So again, thank you.
Whoa, I don't know what to say to that. Thank you.
Well, we're actually coming up at the end of our time with you. I wish we had more time, and at some point maybe we'll bring you back just for more of a get together and just there's so much more I'd like to talk with you. I'm sure we all would like to talk with you, and we want to thank you very much for being here with us today.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope I didn't run away and talk too much, but it was a delight to be able to share with you.
Oh, not at all. It was a pleasure, absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Take care. Be safe, okay?
Indeed, and to you all.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. We have a special guest visiting Planet 8 for the first time, friend of Planet 8, Mr. Lobo of Cinema Insomnia. Straight away, we're going to kick it over to Mr. Lobo. Mr. Lobo, when were you first exposed to Night of the Living Dead?
Exposed, yes, the radiation from Venus that I got exposed to. First of all, thank you so much, and hello everybody. So great to be on the podcast.
Yes, sir. Welcome to Planet 8.
And I'm sure this is probably, the Night of the Living Dead, of course, was made for drive-ins, but I was way too small to see it in the drive-in. But I did see it on television. On Creature Features. My dad was watching it, and that was way too much. I was hiding under I was in my Spider-Man pajamas, wetting myself under the coffee table. So I don't even know if I saw 20 continuous seconds of that movie, because it was so mind-blowingly terrifying. Much more raw than anything I'd ever seen on TV, and certainly much more raw than anybody had ever seen on television. What's interesting about, and I'm assuming everyone in the room is a Bob Wilkins fan, but Creature Features, Bob always had the boast that they were the first to show it on television, and certainly the first to show it uncut. What was interesting is that it was part of a package. And becoming a horror host and kind of learning a little bit about that world, I sort of found out that, these movies kind of went around in packages. Originally, Screen Gems sold all the Universal movies to TV, and we had our first wave of horror hosts like Vampira and Zachary and those guys. Mm-hmm. And then when it got to Bob Wilkins, and what was interesting is those movies were all the classics, right? But when it got to Bob Wilkins' time, or the Silver Age horror host, the package that was going around was actually called the Creature Feature package. Mm. So they basically, just like there were so many shows called Shock Theater, right, there were so many shows that were the name of the show was some variation on Creature Features, or Creature Double Feature, or Creature Feature versus Creature Features. All those different variations of the name came from people, different stations having their spin on that package. So at the same time that Bob Wilkins was showing it, Count Gordeval in Washington, D.C., which is about a couple hours from here, was claiming that they were the first to ever show on TV, uncut, unedited. But so basically, it is for television. It truly is a creature feature. It's a creature feature phenomenon. I think that was the first time anyone ever saw it was hosted, or part of that kind of a show. So anyhow, did you guys watch it on Creature Features?
Well, I'm gonna guess that because Bob's older than us, he usually sees these films in theater or drive-in. Bob.
Well, I wouldn't have been that old because, without giving out my age, because I'm sure a lot of people that listen aren't really good at math. So I was 7.
You don't want to have to take off your shoes. Or
I was 7 years old at the time. But actually, no, the first time I saw it was on Creature Features with Bob Wilkins. In fact, I think I was in either 7th grade, I think. And this friend of mine called me up and he said, Night of the Living Dead is on Creature Features tonight. You have to watch it. And I was like, that sounds kind of scary. And he says, no, you have to watch it. And not only do you have to watch it, but you have to sit in a beanbag chair. Yeah, that was kind of the era. You got to sit in a beanbag chair in the middle of the room with the lights out and watch it.
Ooh, and that beanbag chair is slowly eating you.
Oh, man. Yeah, because, you don't know what's creeping up behind you or from the side or whatever. And so I did it.
Anyone ever barricade their door? Anyone ever push anything against their door while that movie was on in my house? Because when I got older, and I remember I was home alone for the first time, and it was on TV again, or we had rented it, and I just remember just literally pushing something against the door because I thought, just in case.
Well, we're in the house I live in, which is actually the house I grew up in. When you open the door to go down to the basement, the stairs kind of go off into an abyss because they're lit for about halfway down and then it's just black. So growing up, I always figured the ghouls were down there in the basement. Yeah.
So
I would have dreams.
Cooper, you would have been upstairs.
No, I would not go in the cellar. But no, I would have dreams where I'd open the door and look down there and I could hear them, thrashing around down there. And it's funny because that door has a doorknob lock and a chain. And I put that on every night to this day. And I just admitted to Debbie and the kids why I do that the other night. So, the garage door is down there and I can flip the switch off on the garage door so it has no power so no one can get in there. But I still put the chain and the lock on that door.
Well, if the zombies come back, they're going to come through the ground, and that's going to be their access point. So I think it's totally sensible.
But I also when I'm out walking the dogs, as I'm strolling along, I'll look at the houses and think okay, that one would not be good because there's way too many windows ground level. You have to block all those windows, or or this door is too accessible, or whatever. Or hey, that would be a good one because all the windows are at least 8-10 feet off the ground. Those are the things you have to kind of keep in mind when you buy a house too.
And make sure you have a jar full of nails, long nails.
Boards and nails just sort of laying around.
Disposable coffee tables or interior doors.
You think you could run into today, open up a drawer somewhere, and there's just a box full of nails and stuff.
Right.
Grandma and Grandpa had that stuff, but our generation, forget it. You're not going to find any of that anywhere.
You can't even find a pen.
Glue.
Right. Yeah. Forget it.
Or just
get it on Amazon.
You ever go into someone's house and try to find a pen or something to write with?
Right. It's not happening.
Or, you just open the closet and there's
a film, Karen.
Oh, well, so, yeah, you guys are all my Bay Area boys. I was down in Southern California, and so I just remember
my first exposure was reading about Night of the Living Dead. I had this big book called Cult Movies, and I think it was by Danny Peary. I think that's the guy's name.
I've seen that book.
Yeah, it's a great book, and it had Night of the Living Dead in there, and I was like, oh my God, I got to see this movie. And then I started reading more about it. It seemed like it kept popping up everywhere, and they were like, oh, it's this forbidden film. It's horrific. You'll freak out if you see it. And so I think it was when I was 16, one of the stations down in LA, I forget if it was like KCOP or KTTV, they used to show all the scary movies. They were like, we're going to show it for Halloween. You guys, oh my God, it's been, banned, and we're finally going to show it. So me and all my friends were like, oh my God, we got to watch this movie. And we had like a big party, and we were getting ready for it to come on. And we were like 15, 16 years old. It freaked us out. Just because it was that stark, almost documentary style, the black and white and everything. And it was almost because it was so amateurish, it seemed believable, I guess. Because, there'd been other things we'd seen since then, I guess. But and I guess at that point it wasn't, there wasn't a whole lot of gory stuff yet. But it was just... because we thought we were going into it kind of like, oh, hee, fun, and then everybody's just sitting there silent after like 15 minutes or so, And I just remember going home being all freaked out, and I don't think I slept very well that night. And it changed your whole mental attitude about stuff, like looking at houses and like, well, where would I be safe and what could I do? And so
imagine Karen telling her father, we need a jar of nails.
Stop by Home Depot on the way home.
Why don't we have any boards in the garage, Dad? What the hell is wrong with you?
Oh, my dad, man, he used to have tons of boards and things. It was like amazing. He was set. He didn't really believe in stuff. But
I have to say, being out here on the East Coast now, people are a little more worried about tornadoes and hurricanes and extreme weather. So maybe that wasn't, because our house that I'm living in now is pretty much a dead ringer for that farmhouse. This is the oldest house in our neighborhood. I think this house is well over 100 years old. And it definitely has all those looks that the Night of the Living Dead house is, except it's, of course, plastered floor to ceiling with hipster garbage. VHS tapes and board games, and so it doesn't look anything like that. But I feel like maybe that is more common, especially if you think a tornado or a hurricane is gonna come take you to Oz. Maybe boards and nails against the windows maybe was a little more of a thing. I don't know.
Zombie NATO.
Makes sense. Well, what about you, Larry?
I was probably 5 or 6 years old. My cousins were much older than I was, and so they would always talk about the Legend of Hell House and The Exorcist and Jaws, and they'd expose me to these films, so it really stunted my emotional and psychological growth in ways that.
But you were brought up right.
It was Bob, and usually Bob had a good time, but I remember, not a disclaimer, but it was like, you're going to watch, just get under the covers or whatever, and I probably fell asleep, before the whole thing was over. And I've seen it, as we all have many times since then. But I'll tell you, I was watching it the other night with my wife who'd never seen it before. And usually when I'm watching something for the podcast or, just something on my own, Jazz will just kind of like do her own thing on her phone. Everybody has a phone now or a tablet. But she puts down her phone and she really got involved. And so it's a testament to what George Romero did when he made this film, that even today, it still has a resonance. And she was asking all these questions about why did it end that way and what did that mean? And I'm like, that's the kind of film this was. It wasn't just the first zombie movie or, a movie about ghouls. It had like a message, and it had, back then there was no CGI. People had to act. Not taken away from any of the actors today. Not not trying to dig at them.
No, but they couldn't go back and, put in dramatic pauses and make them blink more and all the things that they do to give a better performance out of some of the actors.
Right, and there's kind of a perfection in that imperfection. And I told, because we're big fans of The Walking Dead, and I said, well, back then, do the zombies talk? Do they not talk? Do they walk? Do they run? Do they coordinate their attacks with people? Do they use tools? Because, the little girl used the trowel
zombie number one chases a car with a rock. So, all this stuff about, they have to shamble and be slow and they don't use tools. It's like zombie number one chases a car and tries to smash the window with a rock. So that goes right out the window.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's funny because when I was watching it the other night with Debbie, and I just pointed out and say, look, this guy's using a rock. Usually they say that they can't use tools, and then you've got Karen later in the movie that uses the garden trowel.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually looks around a little bit before she finds this trowel. It's like, all right, she's thinking, she's trying to figure this out.
They're not mindless. There's something there's something else about them.
And the other thing that really worked was, I'm big on the music, but just some of the it almost sounded like a theremin when they'd reanimate and it gave it really weird,
It was an interesting, we have all this modern music where they're remixing and they're adding weird sounds. But that movie, it's like they took a bunch of library music, kind of scrambled it all together, and then they put this wash of strange electronic noises into it. So there's a lot happening in that soundtrack that's really effective, visceral, very visceral.
Yeah, well, last time I was at Monsterpalooza, I picked up the 2 LP set of the soundtrack for Night of the Living Dead. And even though they're full-size LPs, they're at 45 RPM, which people who probably don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, it's 45 RPM.
Records outsold CDs for the first time this year.
Oh, that's
so a
true.
lot more people know what you're talking about.
But yeah, these are 45 RPM so that the sound is better. And the sound on them, even though it's all library music, is just amazing. And they went back and they found all the cues and got them all on the album. And the soundtrack for that movie is great. And they were talking about using gobos everywhere, which is like these metal pieces that go on the front of lights and you cut patterns in them, which is what they used to do in the old noir films. So it's almost, it makes this look like a noir horror film.
Yeah. I love gobos. We did a retro Slinky commercial once, and I remember having an old school lighting guy come in, and he brought out all the gobos and stuff. I'm like, why don't we keep using this stuff? This makes everything look amazing. A white wall is suddenly like a cool, gooky environment with just the right gobo,
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think the look of the film, it's undeniable that that's a huge part of why it had so much impact, because that black and white, and they utilized it so well. It's so stark, and that it sticks in your head, and you see those horrible colorization attempts that were made with the movie. Oh my God, it's so awful.
Oh man, I think the first time I saw it colorized, they had colored ties and shirts and some background stuff and the skin. And everything else was just still shades of gray.
It just looks terrible.
But yeah, it was just like spot color.
I will say I refuse to watch the colorized version of the original. I just no interest.
I'm even more purist than that. I don't even like to see it restored. I like to see it all grainy and scratchy, and because I feel like there was a reality to it. I think what you were saying earlier about it being like a documentary or slightly amateurish. I think it's effective in a similar way that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is effective, because it has this kind of almost documentary feel to it, and it almost feels like something maybe you shouldn't be watching.
Yeah.
Where did this film even come from? And I feel like the fact that most of those prints for television look like they were run over by a truck. I feel like that added to it. I honestly feel that extra abstraction, not only is it black and white, but it's grainy and scratchy. I just feel like it gave it this dimension of, where did this film come from?
Right.
How are we even watching this?
Right.
My wife was asking, why is it so blurry? I'm like, that's part of the fun of the film. I mean, I have a bad copy on DVD of probably a bad VHS transfer, and it really sucks you in. And like I said, she, having never seen this before, just like loved it.
It's too bad that people are not open. You know, we have a lot of people in the world who can't watch a black and white movie. We have a lot of people in the world that can't watch an old movie because they're so used to everything being 4K and crystal clear. I hate that thing on modern TVs that makes everything look like a Spanish soap opera. It's like, how is it? Why would anyone want Ghostbusters to look like it's shot on a soundstage of The Price is Right? I don't understand. Why would you want that much clarity? That little bit of gauze, that little bit of softness, it's like looking at a painting or looking at where it becomes again, that abstraction is supposed to suck you in and help you kind of transition that suspension of disbelief. And it just like, I cannot believe that people who were that spoiled to where they can't watch anything that is not completely clean,
Well, people used to be artists with lighting. I mean, you think about something like the original Star Trek and the way they used to light the sets for mood, and people look at it. I've heard some really just ignorant people remark, well, there's backgrounds are like purple and yellow and red. It's not realistic. It's like, no, it's not realistic. It's people in outer space, hundreds of years in the future. It's mood. And, it's affecting you on an emotional level. It's like, quit nitpicking it.
It doesn't have to look real. It just has to look good. And that stuff looked good.
Right.
Well, think about what people do now, though. What do they get those LED strips and they put them under the shelves or whatever, and suddenly their walls are pink or green or yellow.
Right. That's true. There is more. People are bringing creative lighting into their real lives a lot more, So maybe that will be more realistic as things go on. But honestly, it's not about realism all the time. There is a lot of it is fantasy, and there's two kinds of filmmaking. There's descriptive and there's prescriptive, and sometimes things are not about how things are, but maybe how they could be or would be or should be. And that's a different kind of storytelling.
Right.
Definitely. I very much agree. I'm the kind of guy I'd rather watch, Tom chasing Jerry than Schindler's List. And Schindler's List is a very important film, but I live in reality daily, and especially in this year, 2020, I need to find out that Vader really is Luke's father. I need to find out, that these zombies are, attacking the farm. Right,
I was going to watch Empire Strikes Back tonight. Thank you a lot.
There you go.
I should have said spoiler alert.
No, the escapism of Night of the Living Dead. I mean, if you think about it, you have that nice calm scene at the beginning with Barbara and Johnny in the cemetery. And as soon as that first ghoul shows up, it's just an unrelenting nightmare right till the end. I mean, even when they have like...
It starts off, you see the title, Night of the Living Dead, and here we are in the day in a serene, setting. Yeah, they've driven hours to go, pay their respects to their father because their mother couldn't make it. They're giving you this whole background on these two characters, and one of them is out of the picture within like the first 5 minutes. Yeah. There goes Johnny.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely a good fake out because you really believe that that story is going to be about those two, when it starts off. And it takes a quick 90-degree turn real fast as soon as that sun starts coming down. I've been to that cemetery. Have you guys been to the Evans City Cemetery?
No, unfortunately I haven't.
Never have.
So there's a convention out here called Monster Bash in Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh area, and it's drivable from there. And it's so funny because everybody does the same thing. I thought I was so clever because I went and laid my head down on that one stone that Johnny hits his head on, and then I sort of peek around that other big stone that Barbara's looking around in that famous picture of her, and I'm like walking around reenacting these scenes, and every single person, whether they're a scholar of the movie or not, does the exact same thing. Everybody wants to be in that place.
Mr. Lobo?
Is
there like a lot of people?
No, there isn't a line, but it was really funny when I got back to the convention and I'm showing everybody my pictures, and then they're showing me theirs, and we basically all took the same pictures. But it's amazing that cemetery still exists, and and I think that the interesting thing about that movie is that it's not a Hollywood movie; it's a local movie. Like The Blob is like that too, which is in Pennsylvania also. It's like all those locations are right here. I eat at that diner. I go to that movie theater, and it's like there's something really amazing about a whole town getting together and saying, "Oh yeah, let's make a movie." And then it's like it becomes part of their local pride, where it's part of them forever. And everyone who grows up in that region, just the way we felt about Creature Features or whatever our favorite shows were that were local, in LA or wherever, there's this pride, this pride that comes out.
Well, we do have the Milpitas monster,
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and every horror fan, it's got to talk about the Milpitas monster, because it was made right there. Did they have the claw at the Milpitas Mall for a while?
It was like one of its nails or something. I don't think it's there anymore. Oh. It was over in the automotive section.
They used to do a yearly screening of it in Milpitas at one of the theaters, but I don't know if they've done the last couple. Robert Sherrill was a guy who made the movie, and he still takes it around and shows it here and there. But
I'd love to do it on Cinema Insomnia. I'd love to host it. It'd be fun to do that.
You should try. We were talking offline before we started the show about some of these virtual sets, even beyond like blue screen or green screen. Now they just digitize everything, and you'll never be able to, as a fan, go to that set unless you go to that studio and they turn on all the monitors for you. But there's something, like you said, to be able to sit down in a diner and say, oh, this film was filmed here. It was the Orwigs did that book we covered.
Where Monsters Walked.
Yeah. Where Monsters Walk. And they covered a lot of the films, the early monster films, and where they were. And you can find them and go visit, but I'm moving forward. We're not going to have that opportunity. It's kind of sad.
Oh yeah, right. If everything is on a green screen and it's somebody talking to a ping pong ball, where are all the cool props?
Well, yeah, I was one year. I was down at
where are all the cool locations. Yeah,
one year I was down at Bob Burns' place. And he was telling us, he goes, people used to stop by my house and drop off props and things. Now they just give me discs. I can see, like you go and you take a picture next to a computer. Oh, this is the computer where they made this scene.
Well, and even Bob Burns' gig as a gorilla man, now you just, you pop in your model, your 3D model of your silverback mountain gorilla, and you don't go and hire Bob Burns to be your gorilla in your movie anymore.
That's true. We visited the Monterey Zoo, which is actually in Salinas, but that's beyond the point. Besides the point. And a lot of the animals that they had, lions, there was a little monkey, a spider monkey, they would truck them down to Los Angeles to do commercials, or Bruce Almighty, used their monkey. And they don't get the call anymore because everything is digital or CGI. Yeah.
What was that movie that came out? Was it this year or last year with Harrison Ford and a dog, and then the whole movie, the dog is
Call
CG?
of the Wild.
One scene with a real dog.
Right.
But I thought you were going to say when you went to that zoo that all the animals were CG.
You just have LED screens in cages.
That is going to be the future.
Right.
You just go to a digital zoo. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, look, they brought back Peter Cushing for what was that Star Wars?
Rogue One,
and he was CG.
Yeah, that was actually kind of chilling. I wasn't ready for that. I had mixed feelings the first time I saw that.
Yeah, I think if they did that with any other actor, it might have worked. But I had seen Peter Cushing in so many movies over the years, and you kind of know all his quirks and his expressions and everything. And when you're looking at Rogue One, it's like he's just not quite right.
Yeah.
You know?
And he should be a foot shorter. He's not quite right, but honestly, the guy who was doing the motion capture and the acting, I mean, I felt like they could have just had him be Peter Cushing for a couple of scenes. I don't think that they really needed to fully CG Peter Cushing. Like, I feel like they could have just maybe had, if they needed to change someone's eye color or something to make him resemble him a little bit more. I don't think it's that necessarily bad to have, it's like I've grown up with Bewitched, where like the one Darren disappeared. And then, the other, Dick Sargent disappeared, and then Dick York shows up, or the other way around. Sergeant York? That's so weird.
Yeah, vice versa.
They both have the same first name, and then their last names make another person's name?
Now you know the secret.
So they really didn't want people to know, right?
It's voodoo.
So Dick, I've grown up with Bewitched and other things where it's like, it's a character. That person's not there to play that character anymore, and we just have another actor play the character. Right. I'm not that offended by that. I'm more offended about, okay, they wanted to play the character and then they don't let them. They just go recast it because they want a younger, hipper actor or something.
It seems unnecessary.
Well, we were just talking about the Bond films before we came on here. It's like, how many Bonds have you had? And now everybody's like, okay, who's the next Bond? It's kind of like an event.
How many Doctor Who's have we had?
Mm-hmm.
Good
See,
point.
they came up with that whole regeneration thing. That was brilliant.
Yeah.
It's like now anyone can be Doctor Who.
If you're a person who loves imagination and films of imagination, you've got that kid inside of you. Any explanation is fine, right? If they go, oh yeah, no, this is Earth 2, Peter Cushing. Oh, all right, yeah, that's fine. Oh no, this is his clone. We had the Emperor had a clone of Cushing just in case the Death Star blew up. Any sort of minor story adjustment would instantly make probably half the audience accept it. It doesn't have to be an origin story. Just any explanation of any sort that they could possibly put category that they could put it under, they could be fine with.
Well, I don't think they could ever totally recreate like Dwayne Jones.
No.
Bringing us back to Night of the Living Dead, by the way.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you for doing that. We were getting into Star Wars territory, which would have derailed the podcast for 4 hours. Yes, Dwayne Jones was amazing, and the fact that we had a leading man using, let's see, which term can I use that just fails utterly? A person of color. I'll just pick that one. But the reality of it is that he was the best actor they can find.
Right.
And that's the most beautiful thing about that is he was the best actor, and George Romero didn't think, some people might not go see this movie if we have a black guy as the lead. So, he didn't think like that. He thought, this is the best actor I can find. He's perfect for this role. And having him there gave them a cinematic opportunity, especially when the movie has sort of a countercultural theme. Like, I've heard him talk on this before, where it's like the end of the status quo. It's like, you wake up one morning and the world's not yours anymore. It belongs to somebody else. And I think that he was very much commenting on the sort of the 60s and the changes that were coming and the the youth culture that was coming up. And so I think that he kind of had a little bit of social commentary in there, but having Dwayne Jones as the lead punctuated that so much harder when the militia comes in and kind of just decides to clean house and just puts him out like a zombie after he's been the hero for 2 hours. That I feel like really, that gave that movie it gave the social aspects of the messages of that movie so much more punch because Dwayne Jones was in there. But on top of that, what a charismatic and amazing actor he was, and he just, Carrie's entire scenes, it's like they've got no budget for this amazing truck explosion that we never saw. we have to just sit here and listen to him explain it, but we're into it because he's an interesting guy and we're with him, so it's cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, his whole monologue about being at the diner and seeing, people, seeing the one truck getting engulfed with ghouls, and then the way he got out of there. But I think the best thing about it is, it was a character. It wasn't written to be any ethnicity. It was just a character. And by casting him, they didn't make a point at any part of the film to point out his ethnicity. He was just another character.
Sure.
And at the end, they didn't say, hey, shoot the black guy in the house. It's like,
well, and fortunate and good, and to George Romero's credit or John Russo's credit, no one rewrote the character because they cast him. Oh, well, maybe he's into soul music. Maybe he could sing a little song for us. Yeah, they didn't do any kind of culturally insensitive changes to try to make him more black or something. So which it happens a lot, and not to derail for another film, but in Star Trek, in The Naked Time, when they're all sort of going crazy on the Enterprise and becoming kind of succumbing to all their inner fantasies, it was written that Sulu was supposed to be a samurai,
right?
And he was like, I didn't want to be a samurai, I wanted to be Errol Flynn when I was a kid. and the fact that they allowed that, two embraced that, and made no apologies for it. It's like, what, he's not defined by his race. He's a human being, and and this is what his when his id is released, he's Errol Flynn as a swashbuckler. I would just sort of, I think it's the same kind of thing where it's like, you're writing a character, and a fully dimensional character, and you're not just making concessions because you think you have to.
Right. Well, I think anytime people start seeing somebody of a particular race, ethnicity, religion, whatever, as some sort of monolithic group that, has to, everybody has these characteristics. I mean, that's silly and crazy and insulting. Dwayne Jones, obviously, I did a little reading on him, very well-educated guy, obviously an excellent actor. And they were saying that the original lines were written the character was supposed to be a truck driver, and he didn't really like the lines that much, so he kind of changed them so to suit him better. And like you're saying about the monologue where he was talking about seeing the truck get chased down and the people in the diner get eaten and all that. Now, I guess a lot of that came from him kind of rewriting those lines, and it worked really well.
Well, he was a college professor for a while.
Yeah, he was a college professor. I mean, this
he was very tormented, and I know he didn't really like talking about the movie afterwards. I know that he sort of avoided interviews and stuff like that. And did he ultimately commit suicide? Do we know the word on him?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how he died.
I know. I think he had a very tragic and sad end.
Cancer.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
It was like 1988, I think he passed away.
Doesn't make sense. But yeah, Dwayne Jones, though. But he was. I think it's unfortunately we never got to see him in a dozen other movies. That would have been nice.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because, you also have Harry Cooper, and he's, just a belligerent, unpleasant guy in a lot of ways, and they could have easily made him a bigot, and they didn't go that path. It was just more the argument about, hey, I want to be down here in the basement. No, we should be up here. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. And it kind of goes back and forth between the two, and it doesn't really become personalized at all. It's a survival argument.
But you certainly could read it that way.
If you want to.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think the ambiguity of it definitely also gives it power too.
He wasn't a bigot. He was just an ass. But no, I mean, Carl Hardman, who played Harry Cooper and Russell Streiner, who played Johnny, they were actually producers on the film. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, hey, we need someone for this role, and we need someone without here. Jump in there. In fact, Kira Schoen was his daughter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, his daughter in the movie, but his daughter in real life.
Real life as well.
And I actually read somewhere that Kira Schoen played that corpse at the top of the stairs.
Oh, with the eye?
Yeah, and when Dwayne Jones drags the corpse, to wherever, it doesn't really show where they drag it to, but he starts dragging that corpse. Yeah, that's Kira Schoen in the rug or the blanket or whatever.
Well, she was probably the lightest person in the cast. So.
That's true.
So a little bit on Dwayne Jones, just to remove my foot from my mouth, is that he died of cardiopulmonary arrest, something with his heart, sudden loss of blood flow. So that could go a lot of directions. And he had been in some other movies. He was in Beat Street, of all things, which I remember seeing in 1984 when they had what were the two breakdancing movies that came out at the exact same time.
That's right.
It was like Breakin' and Beats. I think Breakin' and Beat Street came out like the same weekend in 1984. But yeah, he was in that, and he was in Ganja and Hess, and he was in Losing Ground and Vampires, 1986, the movie Vampires, and To Die For, and Negatives in 88, and Fright House in 89. So, it's interesting you hear these urban legends, because I had heard that he had died very early and that he was very sour on his career and committed suicide, and that's not the case from anything I'm immediately finding. So it is interesting how there's so many kind of urban legends and things associated with this movie. I think everybody has their own, weird stories they've heard about the making of the movie, or, I think they even played on this in Return of the Living Dead, where, the Night of the Living Dead really happened and it was a cover up. And,
brilliant.
Yes.
And that's an interesting aspect that we don't have time for, but how John Russo and George Romero kind of had a split where they just both decided to make sequels independently of each other.
There's a lot to have you back, Mr. Lobo, and talk about that, because I'm a huge fan of Return of the Living Dead.
Well, if you can see behind me, I have a giant VHS tape replica of Living Dead, and I've got Return of the Living 2, Return 3, 4, 5 Return of the Living Dead posters around it. So yeah, it's probably one of my all-time favorite go-to horror movies. I just think it's the right amount of funny and scary and inventive, and I kind of like I like my zombies to be a little sci-fi, and it's got a little of that too, and I just think it's I think Dan O'Bannon's treatment of it, his attempt to not step on George Romero's toes by going in a different direction was brilliant, and they were never able to get back there with any of the sequels, but he just did it. I think that movie is so fun. It's the punk rock zombie movie, and those are two great tastes that taste great together.
Well, you talk about John Russo. I mean, everybody credits George Romero for coming up with these ghouls, zombies, whatever, and the whole lore, but it was actually Russo that wrote the original screenplay and came up with the idea of these bodies coming back to life and living off of the dead, or eating the living. That was basically all his idea, not George Romero's.
Yeah. It would definitely, you have a situation, you have a Dark Star situation where you've got two geniuses on the same movie.
Yeah.
I think that, Dan O'Bannon and John Carpenter ended up hating each other on Dark Star, and unfortunately, after Night of the Living Dead, I think George Romero and John Russo kind of went their separate ways too. John Russo's here in Pennsylvania. He's kind of a local boy. I see him pretty often. I always buy weird stuff from him. We got a paperback copy of Return of the Living Dead, the novel, for like $20, which is the cheapest I've ever seen it, ever, and signed.
Hey, I've got the novel
hanging out at his table.
I've got the novel for Night of the Living Dead. I unburied it the other night, and it was written by John Russo, And the cover price was $1.95.
Oh, wow. Now, just move the decimal point.
Yeah. But I actually bought it for $1.95 because I bought it like through one of those elementary school book club things.
Scholastic.
Yeah.
Did you get a pencil topper or did you?
Oh, probably
a poster.
But I used to go through. I used to go through all those.
Poster and like a fuzzy pencil topper.
No, I used to go through all those, and I would pick out all the, sci-fi movie books or the horror monster books or whatever. And yeah, they had Night of the Living Dead one time, so I grabbed that.
Holy crap!
Now, Night of the Living Dead. I guess where do we want to go with next? We want to talk about, I guess, the zombie legacy, right? Because we haven't really mentioned that this is kind of like the first quote unquote. They don't ever use the Z word in the whole movie. They're ghouls technically in the movie, but really the whole format for the whole zombie genre pretty much starts there, right?
Well, in the Romero films, what's the first film where they actually said zombie? Was that Dawn or Day or?
I think it might be Dawn, maybe
Dawn.
Day.
I think Day,
which is 83, right?
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, going back,
for other films that called them zombies before.
Yeah,
but we'd have to look into that.
But going back,
what might have done it retroactively is that when Dawn of the Dead came out, the Italian version was called Zombie.
Ah.
So the Italian Zombie 2, which is Fulci's kind of unauthorized sequel to Dawn of the Dead, is Zombie 2, famously Zombie 2, right? So
yeah.
which is so in Italy's world, the zombie that series are the zombie movies. So maybe worldwide that's where that kind of got popularized. I'm not sure. Someone else could probably correct me on that too.
I just asked the all-knowing internet.
Tell me, Alexa.
It says, I wish I had that voice. I can't quite do it. Says the word zombie is used exclusively by Romero in the script for Dawn of the Dead.
Okay.
Okay.
So there you go.
So Dawn of the Dead is really the start of that, and Romero might be at the heart of the zombie flip, which is interesting because zombies before that were always controlled. You always had kind of the voodoo zombies where you had the Boker who like in White Zombie or in films like that where they were controlling the zombies. Mm-hmm. The zombies were a horde that were controlled by someone else. What's interesting about these zombies is that there's no mastermind. They just kind of like the thing from Return of the Living Dead. They're just being animated. You chop up all the little bits, and the little bits come after you. We don't really know why they're homicidal. We don't really know why that they feed on the living. There's not a lot of why. They just sort of are. They just kind of they appear. They've got this bloodlust built into them. And that is their only program, is to destroy us.
Yeah, they're like an infection more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. But then again, there could be like a modern sequel where they say, "Oh no, this guy was really behind the whole thing."
Well, I know
it was Blofeld.
The whole voodoo thing. The zombies, you bring them back to be a slave. You need someone to build a fence or patch the roof. You bring that person back through whatever voodoo ritual. And it was the horror genre, the films or novelizations that made them into these evil, transition them from ghouls into zombies where they had to eat the living, for survival rather than for, just sport, I guess.
It is interesting that it's kind of like we're on their food chain somehow, where it's just sort of like they just know that, okay, again, Return of the Living Dead did a great job of filling that in where, there's the pain of being dead. It's painful to be dead. And the only thing that sort of stops that pain, and I don't know how you figure that out, trial and error, is eating the brains of the living, right? Yeah. So, or the intestines of the living, or just eating the living in general.
The living, yeah.
That's an interesting thing, and it sort of makes them more sad, where there's a tragedy there, almost in the same way of a vampire that needs blood. they're living a different kind of life than we know, and we're just kind of in their way.
I think zombies and vampires, you mentioned vampires, they're at the top of the food chain. We're used to being, humans at the top of the food chain, at least on this planet.
Yeah, and I think that's what that movie's about, is a switch of power where suddenly you wake up and you're not on the top anymore, And my attitude's kind of bad because I kind of feel like, all right, we had a good run, let's stop shooting zombies. Let them raise their families. They'll probably do a better job than what we did. Just, it's their planet now. Just let them have it. Stop shooting them. Let them raise their families. Let them start their own communities, and maybe they'll do a better job.
Zombies or apes, one of the two.
It's like the I Am Legend, and Romero admits he borrowed a lot from Matheson's I Am Legend.
Yeah, I think Carnival of Souls and I Am Legend and a lot of things that played, and I'm eating like a jerk, I'm sorry. Eating brains.
What are you eating,
brains. Brains. But a lot of the films that they watched with Chili Billy Cardilli, who was their Bob Wilkins, their horror host, they watched his show on their local Pittsburgh station, and they saw all those shows like Carnival of Souls and the I Am Legend, the movie
Last Man on Earth.
Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price. Those movies, they kind of internalized all those movies, like every director does. They take all the stuff from when they were kids or when they were younger or things that influenced them, and then they kind of tell it with their own spin on it. I feel like every director tries to legitimize the stuff that their mom hated. So it's like, if you're George Lucas, your mom probably hated those adventure serials that you're watching. If you were Quentin Tarantino, your mom probably hated all those crime exploitation movies that you were renting. So, I kind of feel like, a lot of people are just trying to make A versions of the B stuff that they loved when they were kids. I think a lot of directors do that.
True.
They're trying to legitimize their own love for something.
Well, look, kids, we're coming up towards the end of the podcast, so we're going to do a round robin. Any last thoughts or comments anyone wants to make?
Well, I'll jump in, and I think one of the strongest parts of Night of the Living Dead, which we haven't talked about, was the newscasts in the background.
Yeah.
Because, you're following this group of people in the farmhouse, but it's the newscasts that are letting you know that this is a global phenomenon and it's happening all over. And some of the descriptions, like the one guy talks about the cadaver with no arms, no legs, but it came to life and tried to move, and things like that. It's like all the imagery that puts into your head. And that, I think they did that also in like the slime people. They had a lot of the news stuff in the background.
When you say that, when you describe it like that, what it makes me think of is War of the Worlds, and I never quite put that spin on Night of the Living Dead before, but it definitely has that kind of this invasion that is kind of being told to us in an oral way.
Right, there's that narrative, and it kind of gives us insight that the characters who we're watching don't necessarily have.
Yeah,
what
cool.
Really struck me this last time watching it, without getting too political here, but how the characters were relying on the newscast and saying, well, let's watch it. The authorities will tell us what to do. Right. And I, going through what we've been through the last few months and thinking about that, and I don't think anybody's looking for the authorities to tell us.
Well, they tell you stay inside. Me to
stay away from zombies. I have my rights.
Well, they tell you, stay inside. And then a few minutes later, they're like, oh, no, go out. We've got armed troops at these different places. You can go out to these shelters. And so, they don't even get it right, really.
Well, and Jasmine's the type of person that likes to talk back to the screen. So whenever the news would come on and say, go to these shelters, she's like, why aren't you guys going to the shelters? Shoot them in the head. Jesus, they said shoot him in the head, you guys. Why aren't you listening? I'm like, okay, they're not watching the newscast at World Deer, you know.
Yeah, what a great film. What a lasting impact. The fact that we're still talking about it today and 1968, what are we talking about? 52 years or more?
Yeah.
You know, that is really the testament of a good film that, you know, where there's this lasting resonance. I mean, does anybody know what the A movie was that came out at the same time? Was it Planet of the Apes? It's amazing to me that a movie that was probably made on 1/10 of the budget or less, you know, has as much or more resonance than something that 20th Century Fox had all their resources at their disposal for. You know,
I think the budget. I think they raised like 114,000.
What's that, Bob?
Yeah, no, it was 114,000 is what they raised for Night of the Living Dead. That's what the budget was.
That's amazing. That's amazingly cheap, because just the film alone would have cost a lot.
Yeah, I think they like figured out it was equivalent to like 800,000 or something today.
Yeah. And I think they all put in, I don't know what the number was, but everybody chipped in like 6,000 or something.
Yeah, that's what I read.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they had to get more. But I mean, Romero and I think Russell and Romero were both like making documentaries before that and commercials and, you know, office training films. They were mad because
they would have these high-end clients, and then their clients would, once they got bigger, would just take their business to New York or LA or a different house to get their stuff made. So they never got the chance to do the things they wanted to. So they just did it themselves.
Interesting.
And I think that is a great thing of that is it was a do-it-yourself movie, and like what you guys are doing, you guys are doing it yourself. This is your radio, you know, and this is a radio program for the internet.
We just wish we had 114,000.
It's more like 14
let's all
bucks.
put in $6.
That's right.
$6.
Who's got it? All right. Who's first? All right. I got my $6 on the table. We're gonna take this podcast to the top. You know, I think that again, I think it's a lasting thing. I think that every generation finds it. You know, when I first showed it on Cinema Insomnia, and I know we were trying to wrap this up, but when I first showed it on Cinema Insomnia, I thought, well, this is what Bob Wilkins showed me. I'm not really doing anything other than a parody of what he used to do, or a spoof of what a horror host does. You know, because everyone's seen this movie, everybody knows this movie, and then I'm getting into my car, and some 16-year-old girl runs up to me and says, "I saw Night of the Living Dead for the first time Saturday night, Mr. Lobo. Oh my God!" And I thought, oh wow, I showed that to them. I am forever linked to that experience for them, you know,
really cool.
And it made me take my job so much more seriously. I really thought for the first year, I really thought I was Count Floyd. I really thought I was a parody of a horror host for somebody who remembers what a horror host is. I never ever counted on there being more young people coming in. Never ever thought that it would be more than just nostalgia.
That is very cool.
But thank you so much for having me on. Are we supposed to plug ourselves? Is that what happens?
We will. Karen, you have any last words, Karen?
Oh no, I think we've done a good job wrapping it up, and let's move along to our censor sweep. Unless you've got something there.
I will say I appreciate Mr. Lobo, his comment about the Italian zombie film. And we were talking about who coined the zombie, and found out that it was actually Romero. But I could imagine the Italians, "Come ti amo ghoul." No. Would have been an interesting conversation to be privy to. But yes, we are at that part of our show where we would traditionally have our censor sweep. And Mr. Lobo, you're on the show. We appreciate you being on. We hope you come on again in the future.
My pleasure. So fun. It went by too fast. I think we could have gone for another 16 hours on that.
All right, let's do it.
A marathon.
Yeah. But Mr. Lobo, please share with us. I have a couple of copies of your show, Cinema Insomnia, on DVD and Blu-ray. the Night of the Living Dead, Bob Wilkins' Halloween special. But please share with our listeners, how can they locate you on the internet? How can they find some of your wares and products?
Sure, thank you. I'll try to be quick. Unfortunately, you're forced to fragment yourself so much these days on so many different media. Mm-hmm. This year, because of unfortunate events, we're not doing as much live stuff. So at least I don't have a million of those things to plug. But if you're just starting out, you've never seen me before, we've got 4 episodes on Amazon Prime of Cinema Insomnia, which includes the Bob Wilkins special. Nice. If you have seen me before, there's hundreds of episodes on Vimeo. I have my own streaming channel called OSI 74 for Roku. So if you add OSI 74 for Roku, I even have old creature features stuff on there. I've got old cartoons, other horror hosts, lots of weird stuff on OSI 74 for Roku. I have a YouTube channel for Cinema Insomnia. I have a YouTube channel for Mr. Lobo. I'm on Twitch. I did a live stream on Cinema Insomnia. I did a live stream last night on Twitch where we showed a double feature, and I was in the chat with the fans. We do live events. We're doing a Blade Runner event in November. We just CinemaInsomnia.com is I guess the show. I'm on Facebook. There's a Mr. Lobo's fan group. It's Mr. Lobo Cinema Insomnia fan group. You get the DVDs from Alpha Video. There's 17 titles on Alpha Video, including Night of the Living Dead. And I'm the easiest person to find on the internet. Look up Mr. Lobo Cinema Insomnia. This is our 19th year doing the show. We're doing our 20th anniversary next year. I want to do something special, but honestly, I have no idea yet.
Night of the Living Dead.
But thank you so much for having me on and letting me plug all my stuff.
Yeah.
That was great having you on.
My first exposure to Mr. Lobo was Thrillville. Mm-hmm. And, those live shows. I love Cinema Insomnia, don't get me wrong. I love the theme song. I love Miss Mittens. I love all the...
Hardcore if you're going to drop Miss Mittens on a podcast.
Hey, I have my Mr. Lobo decoder ring here somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
Bob Burns has one of those, too.
Oh, nice. But, yeah, it was a lot of fun to have you on the show. We appreciate you being on. Hope to have you on again in the future at some point.
I'd love it.
All right.
On that note, this will conclude this transmission from Planet 8. We would like to thank all of our intergalactic audience for listening. Be sure to head on over to our website at www.planet8podcast.com, where you can get more information on this episode's topic.
For more conversation, find us on Twitter at Planet8Cast.
Or on Facebook at facebook.com/Planet8Podcast.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in each and every episode. We look forward to your input and opinions. Until next time, this is Planet 8 signing off. End transmission.
By George, he's got it. It is the end.
All law enforcement agencies and the military have been organized to search out and destroy the marauding ghouls. The Survival Command Center at the Pentagon has disclosed that a ghoul can be killed by a shot in the head or a heavy blow to the skull. Officials are quoted as explaining that since the brain of a ghoul has been activated by the radiation, the plan is kill the brain and you kill the ghoul.
Okay, he's dead. Let's go get him. That's another one for the fire.